The real genius isn't the one who works the hardest. It's the one who has fun while doing what they love. Society has taught you to associate success with sacrifice, exhaustion, and suffering. But what if I told you the secret is to flip that logic upside down? That the path to the top isn't a staircase of pain, but a river of curiosity. The real secret is something much simpler and at the same time much harder: doing what you love. I never understood why people treat work like a prison. They turn what could be a game into torture, and that's exactly where they lose. Human beings were made to discover, to create, to be amazed. That's when the mind works best. It's not about waking up early, it's about waking up awake. It's not about working hard, it's about working alive. When you truly love what you do, you don't need to convince yourself to keep going. No one needs to push you. You're moved from within by something that burns quietly, the pure desire to understand. Time passes and you don't even notice. You're not working. You're playing with the universe, tinkering with the gears of reality. And when that happens, success stops being the goal, it becomes the consequence. Most people try to force the mind with cheap motivation, but motivation is volatile. What you really need is enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is different. It's born from curiosity, from passion, from love for something. And when you find it, nothing feels heavy anymore. You become light, natural, fluid. Routine turns into pleasure, and every obstacle becomes an experiment. That's why people who love what they do never work another day in their lives, because work dissolves into the joy of creation. People live in a hurry. They want to arrive fast, achieve fast, prove fast. But the secret is actually in stopping, in breathing, in realizing that success isn't a destination, it's a way of walking. Life wasn't made to be conquered, it was made to be experienced. And the process is where everything happens. When you learn to love the process, anxiety disappears. You stop watching the clock. You stop comparing yourself. You stop chasing applause that never fills anything inside you. Because suddenly you realize happiness doesn't come after. It happens during. Joy is in the moment, in the movement, in doing for the simple pleasure of doing. And that's when success stops being a goal and becomes a natural result. Most people chase results because they're afraid to get lost. But true learning happens when you get lost on purpose. When you dive into the unknown with curiosity, not fear. When you laugh at your mistakes, allow yourself to fail, and play with chaos. Because it's in playing with chaos that discoveries are born. It's in the mess that the mind lights up. You want to know when success arrives? When you forget about it. When the joy of doing is so great that the outcome no longer matters. When the simple act of creating, studying, teaching, or understanding is already enough to feed your soul. The reward isn't at the end, it's found along the way. And that's why those who learn to love the process never work another day in their lives. So look at what you do. Don't ask, how much will this give me? Ask, how does this make me feel? Because if what you do ignites something inside you, if it wakes you up, makes you lose track of time, then success has already begun. Everything else, fame, money, recognition, will come naturally as a reflection of your own joy. People talk a lot about discipline, as if it were a prison, a battle against yourself. But real discipline has nothing to do with that. The kind of discipline that transforms you comes from love. No one needs willpower to do what they love. No one needs to force themselves toward what inspires them. Motivation fades, but love sustains. When you love the process, effort disappears. You wake up with energy, not because you have to, but because you want to dive deeper. Fatigue still exists, but it doesn't defeat you, because what you do has meaning. Love gives you direction, curiosity gives you energy, and discipline becomes natural. And when discipline becomes natural, success becomes inevitable. Stop fighting what you do. Start falling in love with it. Passion is the most intelligent form of discipline there is. It's the flame that never goes out. Now pay attention, because there's a kind of noise that almost no one notices, but it controls the minds of nearly everyone. It's the noise of comparison. People spend their whole lives trying to prove something, and that's exactly why they never feel complete. They look sideways instead of inward. They want to be admired, not fulfilled. And that's the loudest noise of the modern mind. They want the car, but not for the freedom it brings. They want someone to look and say, wow. They want the expensive watch, but don't care about time. They want the big house, but spend the whole day away trying to pay for it. It's a race without a finish line, and the faster they run, the less sense it makes. The truth is, hardly anyone is really living. People are competing for attention, not for purpose. They're fighting to see who can fake it best. And the more they listen to the world's noise, the less they hear their own mind. They live to be seen, but forget to exist. And what's worse, they call that success. The problem is the noise is addictive. Tiny doses of approval keep you dependent. But in the silence you feel the emptiness. And that's why almost no one can stand it. Because silence shows who you are without the applause, and that terrifies people. But that's exactly where freedom begins. When you stop needing to be seen. When you realize that your peace is worth more than your image. So start ignoring the noise. Ignore the eyes of others. Ignore the market, the trends, the need to seem smart. All of that is distraction. The only sound that matters is the one that comes from your own conscience. When you're silent, doing what you love, the right way. Everything else is just echo, and no echo ever built a thought. The day you truly understand this, everything changes. You stop running. You stop trying to prove, to compete, to follow the current. Because you realize that real power lies in doing things for the right reason. And the right reason is never applause. It's the quiet satisfaction of knowing that you're in control of your own mind. Most people live as if there's an invisible audience judging their every move. But the truth is, no one's watching. Everyone's too busy trying to look good themselves. So why waste your life trying to please people who aren't even looking? The time you spend trying to impress others is the time you lose being impressed by life itself. Freedom begins the moment you decide to silence the world and listen to what truly matters. When your joy comes from what you do, not from what others say about it. When your focus returns to what's essential, to learn, to create, to discover, to understand. That's the point when work stops being work and becomes expression. When effort turns into curiosity, and success becomes nothing more than a natural consequence. It's simple. Stop chasing the next round of applause and start chasing the next idea. Stop running after approval and start running after understanding. Because when you do what you love, truly love, the world stops being a stage. It becomes a laboratory. And that's when you stop pretending to live and start experimenting with life itself.
Ignore the noise. Don't try to be better than others. Try to be more real than you were yesterday. Because in the end, the ones who win aren't those who have the most or seem the most. It's the ones who live with purpose, who think for themselves, and who find meaning in the simple act of existing. That's the secret to never working another day in your life. To love what you do so deeply that the line between living and working disappears. Everything else is just noise, and noise teaches nothing. Before you go, I want you to comment something down below. What's been distracting you from what really matters? Write it honestly. That's what builds a community of free minds. People who think, who question, who challenge themselves. And if you made it all the way here, congratulations. Very few do. Most people stop halfway, the moment the video stops entertaining and starts confronting. But you stayed, and that says a lot about who you are. So don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next reflection. Stay curious, keep learning, and above all, keep listening to the one thing the world keeps trying to silence, your own.
About 1 in 9 people over the age of 65 will be diagnosed with some form of dementia, and that number jumps to nearly 1 in 3 after 85. And here's the shocking truth. It may seem like an inevitable fate, but it isn't. Research from leading neuroscience centers shows that people who keep their brains active can cut that risk by up to 50% in their likelihood of developing dementia. And now, listen carefully. When you stop learning, your brain begins a silent process of deterioration. Memory becomes fragile. Reasoning slows down. Creativity fades. You start to lose the very thing that makes you human, the ability to think freely, to question, to create. You probably know that our bodies need constant stimulation. When someone stops training their muscles, what happens? They shrink, they weaken, they become fragile.
The brain is like an invisible muscle. When we stop reasoning, questioning, and learning, it begins to wither in silence. The connections that support memory, logic, and creativity start to break down. And this process gives no warning. One day you simply wake up and realize you're forgetting simple details. You no longer think as clearly. And the mental energy that once felt natural is gone. Hundreds of millions of people around the world already live this reality. Many don't realize that the root cause is not just age or cruel destiny, but the lack of constant mental stimulation. How many times have you heard someone say, "I got old and lost my memory"? What almost no one tells you is that memory loss doesn't come from age itself, but from stagnation. A person stops challenging themselves, stops studying, stops learning new things, and the mind shifts into survival mode. It stops growing because it sees no need, and when that happens, not only does memory weaken, but the entire body begins to respond with signs of decline. But don't worry, there is a solution. You can change everything starting today, if you're willing. Imagine being able to stop this process before it even begins. Imagine living your whole life with mental clarity, with the energy to learn something new every single day. It's not just about reading more books or memorizing information. It's about staying alive on the inside, about challenging your mind at every moment, like a scientist facing the unknown. And here's the key. Continuous learning is like oxygen that keeps this extraordinary machine running at peak performance. Without challenges, without new information, without curiosity, the brain suffocates. But when you feed it with study, with reasoning, with bold questions, something amazing happens. It builds new connections, strengthens memory, opens doors that once seemed closed. And this is not only for the young, not only for scholars, it's for everyone, at any age. Imagine living your entire life with mental clarity. This is not just about reading more books. It's about staying alive on the inside. It's about constantly challenging yourself, acting like a scientist before the unknown, and keeping the flame of curiosity alive. Because if you stop learning, your brain gets sick. Now that you understand the danger of letting your brain sit idle, the inevitable question arises. What can you do to keep it from wasting away? The answer is clear. You have to keep it moving. And I'm not just talking about crossword puzzles or memorizing numbers. I'm talking about a lifetime of challenges, of new experiences, of insatiable curiosity. Every time you learn something new, every time you push your mind to wrestle with a different concept, it responds by creating new connections, strengthening old ones, and opening pathways that didn't exist before. It's as if you were expanding an invisible map inside your head. Every new word, every idea, every calculation, every reflection is a brick added to that mental construction. And here's the secret. No matter your age, the brain can always be trained. Think with me. An older person who decides to learn a new language challenges their mind just like a young student would. They're not just memorizing words or phrases, they're expanding circuits, forcing the brain to build new connections, exercising memory, attention, and even creativity. Each word learned is like a weight lifted in the gym of the mind, and science has already shown this effort drastically reduces the chance of developing dementia. Now picture another scene. A man of the same age, but who decided to stop. He repeats the same routine every day, never reads anything new, never challenges himself to understand something different. His brain conserves energy, settles, begins to shut down connections that are no longer used. It's like a muscle that weakens until it has no strength left. In a short time, memory lapses appear, reasoning slows down, and what could have been prevented turns into destiny. That's why we can never stop. Studying, reading, talking with people who think differently, learning music, writing, daring to take on new intellectual challenges. All of this works like a vaccine for the brain. It's the invisible shield against forgetting. Now pay close attention to me because I have a challenge for you. I want you to pick, in your head, one number between 0 and 10. Got it? Now pick another number, between 11 and 20. Hold those two numbers firmly in your mind. Now, without paper, without a calculator, only with the power of your reasoning, multiply them together. Take a deep breath, think slowly, do the math in your head. It may seem simple, but this small exercise is already activating connections you often leave dormant.
If you went with 8 and 19, may the universe help you. I sure won't.
And here's the most important part. Write the result of that multiplication in the comments. Leave it there. That will show not only that you listened, but that you acted, that you're not just a spectator, but an active participant in strengthening your own mind. The more you exercise your mind, the more protected you become. And here's the point I want you to remember. It's not about age, it's about attitude. The brain of an older person who keeps learning stays younger than that of a younger adult who stopped challenging themselves. Whoever keeps curiosity alive, whoever never stops seeking knowledge, not only protects memory, but also gains vitality for an entire lifetime. Now listen carefully. You need a practical guide that will keep you disciplined even when motivation disappears. Because the truth is simple. Motivation is like the wind, it comes and goes. What sustains you is habit, routine, the conscious choice not to stop. Pay close attention now because I'm going to give you powerful techniques to train your mind every single day. First, choose something you enjoy, but that also demands effort. It could be learning a language, playing guitar, solving chess problems, writing stories, painting, or even studying mathematics. The secret is to unite pleasure and challenge. What entertains you keeps you consistent. What challenges you expands your mind. And once you've learned, start teaching. Yes, teaching. Because teaching is the key that accelerates learning, deepens understanding, and turns information into wisdom. When you explain something to another person, your brain has to organize ideas, simplify complex concepts, and find examples that make sense. This process not only locks memory in place, but multiplies the strength of neural connections. It's as if by teaching, you etched knowledge into a deeper layer of your mind.
And here's the most amazing part. You don't need a classroom for this. You can teach your grandchildren, nieces, nephews, friends, anyone. You can even teach yourself. Yes, talk out loud in the car, in the bathroom, in front of the mirror. Imagine you're explaining to an invisible audience. Every time you put yourself in this role, your mind grows stronger. Science has already shown that the brain learns in stages. First, when you receive information, then when you practice. But the peak comes when you teach. That's when your mind realizes what it truly knows and what it still needs to learn. Now imagine the impact this could have on your life. You read a book and then explain it to someone. You learn a new word in another language and teach it to your grandchild. You study a complex idea and then summarize it out loud, as if you were giving a lecture. This habit turns knowledge into mastery. And here's the final key. Don't wait to become an expert to start teaching. Teach from the very beginning, even if it's only a little. Because every explanation is training. Every attempt to translate a concept is a victory of the brain over stagnation. A master is not someone who knows everything, but someone who never stops learning and sharing. Second technique, set small, consistent goals. Don't try to learn 100 words at once. Learn 5 words a day, but do it every day. The mind responds better to consistency than to bursts of effort. The brain loves rhythm. Train active memory. It's not enough to read or listen, you need to recall. Close the book and try to repeat what you read. Pause the video and explain to yourself what you just heard. It's in this effort to remember that memory strengthens. Create a fixed ritual. Just like you brush your teeth without thinking, make mental training a non-negotiable habit. It can be 20 minutes in the morning or half an hour before bed. What matters is that it's sacred, a promise you make to yourself.
Third technique, eliminate distractions, turn off notifications, create a quiet space. Your brain cannot grow if it's constantly being pulled away. Focus is the bridge between you and knowledge. Fourth technique, mix pleasure with discipline. Read about topics you love, but once in a while choose something difficult. Learning only what you like won't expand the mind. Facing what makes you uncomfortable is what creates new connections. Fifth technique, reward yourself. Every time you reach your goal, celebrate. A coffee, a walk, a break. The brain responds to reward and associates effort with pleasure. Imagine this. If you dedicate just 20 minutes a day to this process, in 1 year, you'll have invested more than 120 hours in training your mind. And that could be the difference between a brain that fades and a brain that keeps shining until the very last day of your life. Discipline is the key. Don't wait for motivation. Expect results. Every day you keep the habit alive, you are building an invisible fortress that protects your memory, your identity, and your freedom. So starting today, make it a ritual. Learn, explain, teach, even if it's just to yourself, because teaching is learning twice. And that's the path to keeping your mind alive, strong, and luminous until the final second of your life. Like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to keep your brain young and sharp, because here I'll show you how to never let your mind stop. Leave a comment telling me what you thought about this reflection. What struck you the most? What are you going to start applying from today on? Remember, every comment is one more step in this mental training, because learning alone is powerful, but learning in community, sharing ideas, is even more transformative. So comment, like, subscribe, turn on the bell, and never let your brain stop. Pay close attention to me right now, because I'm about to reveal something you probably never stopped to think about. Your own brain is a liar. Yes, the most sophisticated machine in the universe, the one that carries all your knowledge and memories, has a dangerous trick. It makes you believe you've learned something, when in reality, you haven't learned anything at all. But relax. Don't go picking a fight with your husband or wife just because their brain is a liar too. That's a factory defect, not bad intentions. If it weren't, nobody would survive a family dinner. But now, let's get serious. Most of the time, you don't actually forget what you learned. The truth is, you never really understood it. It was your brain trying to trick you into giving up and going off to do something easier. And this is exactly where the secret lies. The brain prefers to save energy and stick to simpler things. So when you take a complex subject and simplify it, you're speaking the language it understands. It's like turning a scary monster into a child's toy. Suddenly, what seemed impossible becomes interesting, even fun, and accessible. The brain gets curious. It stops running away. Think about this. If you try to memorize the formula for gravity, you'll get lost in symbols. But if you translate it into something simple, gravity is the way the universe keeps things from flying off. Your mind opens up. Complexity becomes clarity. The brain would rather have you put in as little effort as possible, make you think you've understood, and then push you to spend energy on immediate survival tasks. The problem is, in the modern world, this trap is deadly for anyone who truly wants to learn. Imagine this. You read a chapter in a book, close it, and think, okay, I got it. But the truth is you didn't. You just recognize the words. And the brain loves this trick. It confuses familiarity with understanding. It's like looking at an old photo. You recognize the image, but that doesn't mean you know the story behind it. Recognition is not knowledge. That's the first point I want you to take away. Don't trust that comfortable feeling of, I already understand. Whew. It's an illusion. Now think about this. If the brain loves the easy path, why try to learn in the hardest possible way? When you study a subject filled with jargon and complicated phrases, your brain quickly gives up. It hates meaningless effort. The secret is to simplify, to turn the complicated into simple, the obscure into clear, the heavy into light. When you simplify, you're not dumbing it down. You're making it accessible to your own thinking. It's like translating a foreign language into your native tongue. Suddenly, everything makes sense. But here's the problem. Schools and universities teach us the exact opposite. They throw formulas, dates, and ready-made definitions at us, expecting us to memorize and repeat. And memorization is the biggest mistake of all. The brain doesn't like memorizing. It likes understanding. When you try to just memorize, what happens? You forget. It's inevitable. The information walks in through the door, but it never finds a place to stay. You memorize it for the test, but after a few days, poof, it's gone. And this is where one of the greatest secrets comes in. If you want to truly learn, you need to teach. Teach even when you don't know it perfectly. Teach by talking to yourself, in the shower, in the car, in front of the mirror. Teach to a child, to a friend, even to someone imaginary. When you try to explain, the brain immediately notices the gaps, notices what's missing, and starts working to fill those holes. It's in this effort of turning the complex into the simple that real learning happens. The brain only learns when it's forced to organize, to connect, to transform. If you only read and repeat, it keeps lying to you, pretending you know. But when you explain, even imperfectly, you force your mind to build a solid structure. It's like laying the foundation of a house. Without it, everything collapses. Now imagine this. You spend hours reading, highlighting, repeating, and when it comes time to actually use what you studied, nothing. Empty. The mind feels like a drawer stuffed with loose papers. And do you know why? Because you're studying the wrong way. The brain doesn't learn from colorful highlights or the false sense that reviewing silently is enough. It learns when it is forced to build, to organize, to transform. And here lies the key to turning any subject into true knowledge. You must be able to explain it as if you were talking to a child. If you can't, it means you haven't understood it yet. And this is the moment when most people realize the big illusion. The mind loves to pretend it knows. It's satisfied with memorized phrases, but it can't recreate the reasoning behind them.
The brain likes what's simple. It was built to look for shortcuts. But here's the secret. When you simplify something yourself, you're not just making it easier, you're forcing your mind to organize chaos, to translate confusion into clarity. That's real learning. Want an example? Think about quantum physics. Many people give up the moment they hear the name because they imagine endless formulas and impossible equations. But what if I put it this way? Quantum physics studies the hidden rules that govern the invisible world of particles, which behave in strange, almost magical ways, but still follow their own laws. Suddenly, what seemed unreachable becomes an invitation to curiosity. Or take Einstein's relativity. It sounds impossible, but it's simple. Time is not the same for everyone. Whoever moves faster feels time passing more slowly. It's like being on a bus. To you sitting inside, the clock seems to tick normally, but to someone watching the bus go by, it looks different. That's all relativity is. Time and space change depending on speed. Now think about derivatives in math. Many people freeze when they see the symbols, but simplify it. A derivative is just asking, what's the speed right now? If a car is going 50 miles per hour, the derivative is telling you exactly that, the rate of change at that moment. And DNA? It sounds intimidating, like something only a mad scientist would understand. But in reality, it's just a recipe book inside your body. The letters are the ingredients, and each recipe produces a protein. And proteins are what build everything in you: skin, hair, muscles. Another example, the second law of thermodynamics. Complicated name, but it's really this simple. Everything tends to get messy on its own. A clean room will never magically get cleaner by itself. It always moves toward disorder. To bring order, you have to spend energy. Even complex numbers, which sound scary, are simple. They're just a way of dealing with problems that didn't have answers before, like the square root of a negative number. It's like inventing a new tool in math to solve problems nobody could solve before. Do you see it? What once seemed impossible becomes obvious once you simplify. The brain stops running away because now it understands the logic. The secret isn't memorizing. It's translating the strange into something you already know. And when you simplify and start using the technique of explaining out loud, something magical happens inside your brain. It's like it gets exposed. While you're reading silently, it can pretend it understands. But when you try to put it into words out loud, the lie shows up immediately. You forget. And that's wonderful, because now you know exactly where the gaps in your knowledge are. Picture this. You're in the car trying to explain to a friend how gravity works. If all you've memorized is the phrase, "Gravity is the force that pulls bodies toward the center of the earth," you'll stop there. But when you start to explain it out loud, you realize you don't know why it acts that way, or how it works on other planets. That discomfort is the sign your mind needs to really get to work. Do this all the time. Do it alone. Explain as if you were teaching it to children. And then you might ask me,
But what if people call me crazy? Let me tell you something. If someone catches you talking to yourself in the shower about Einstein's theory of relativity, yeah, they might think it's odd. But you know what's even stranger? Studying for 10 years of your life and forgetting it all in 2 weeks. That's the real madness. If they call you crazy, thank them. Say, "Thank you, I'm practicing the same method that won Richard Feynman a Nobel Prize. And you, still repeating things like a parrot?" And flash that victorious smile. Think about it. Which would you rather be? The crazy one who really learns, or the normal one who memorizes today and forgets tomorrow? The person talking to themselves in the car about physics might look eccentric, but the person who never tries keeps falling for their brain's lies. And it doesn't matter if you explain it wrong, if you invent weird analogies, if your explanation sounds childish. That's the whole point. It's by trying to explain things simply, even in silly ways, that you discover whether you truly learned. If the explanation comes out clear, you've mastered it. If you get stuck, you go back, study again, simplify more, and try once more. That cycle is pure gold. Now think about how powerful this is. When you explain out loud, you're not just repeating, you're creating new connections in the brain. You're training your long-term memory, reinforcing neural pathways that won't fade away with time. It's the difference between writing something in the sand and carving it in stone.
Now type this in the comments. I won't let my brain fool me. When you write it, it's the beginning of reprogramming your mind. You're declaring that you refuse to be tricked by a lazy brain. From this simple act, you start awakening a new version of yourself, more focused, more disciplined, more unstoppable. Make this your first step toward achieving the impossible. Pay close attention now, because this part is decisive. You can simplify a subject. You can explain it out loud, even to your dog. But without effort and discipline, all of it dissolves into thin air. Knowledge has to be watered every day, like a plant that only grows when it's cared for. The problem is that the brain hates continuous effort. It loves immediate reward. That's why you can spend hours on social media but complain about 5 minutes of studying. But true knowledge doesn't come from ease. It's born out of discomfort. Think of a muscle. You don't get strong by lifting a weight once. You get strong by repeating, by feeling the pain, by pushing through the resistance. The brain works the same way. Every time you review, explain again, simplify again, you're lifting mental weights. It's tiring, but that's how the mind becomes sharp. Now imagine this. You simplify Einstein's theory of relativity. You explain it out loud. You spot the gaps. What should you do next? Go back. Read again. Think again. Speak again. That again is what shapes memory. Here's where effort comes in. It's not enough to understand once. You need to consolidate. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If you don't have discipline, you'll never have consistency. And without consistency, there is no lasting learning. The brain needs spaced repetition, constant returns to the subject. It's like sharpening a blade. Each stroke removes an imperfection until the blade can cut through the impossible. Discipline isn't studying when you're motivated. Discipline is studying even when you don't feel like it, even when it's boring, even when the bed is calling your name. That's the moment when you stop being a prisoner of your lazy brain and become its master. So remember this, simplifying opens the door. Teaching out loud is stepping through it, but discipline is what keeps you on the other side. Now let me ask you a question. What makes someone get out of bed before the sun rises? What makes someone endure sleepless nights studying, practicing, failing, and trying again? It's not talent. It's not luck. It's desire. Desire is the invisible fuel that pushes you through any obstacle. If you want to be better, you first have to truly want it. Desire is not a superficial wish. It's when you feel you can't live without it. It's when studying stops being an obligation and becomes part of who you are. But desire needs direction. That's where willpower comes in. Desire is the spark. Willpower is the movement. It's saying, I won't wait for perfect conditions. I'll start now.
with what I have. Willpower doesn't ask for permission. It acts, even when you don't know the whole path. And above all, you need a purpose. Purpose is the compass. Without it, you run in circles. With it, even the heaviest effort gains meaning. Those who have purpose don't study just to pass a test. They study to transform themselves, to leave a mark, to serve something greater. Imagine this. Two people are carrying stones. One complains, says it's heavy, says it doesn't make sense. The other smiles because they know they're building a cathedral. The stone is the same, the effort is the same, but purpose changes everything. Do you want to become better? Then feed your desire every single day. Turn that desire into willpower, into practical action, and guide that willpower with a purpose so great that even the hardest days become part of your victory. Because in the end, knowledge isn't just about piling up information. It's about becoming someone capable of achieving the impossible. And only those with burning desire, steady will, and clear purpose ever get there. Now, to make a commitment to yourself, write this in the comments. From today on, I will study, simplify, and teach. That will be your public commitment to true learning. And if this video made sense to you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Remember this, true learning is not in what you read, but in what you can transform inside yourself. Knowledge doesn't change the world just by existing. It changes the world when it changes you.
You see, there's this particle called a positron. It's like an electron, but positive charge. And everybody learns that in school, antimatter and all that. But here's what they don't tell you. When you actually do the math, when you actually sit down and calculate what's going to happen in an experiment, the way to get the right answer is to think of a positron as an electron going backwards in time. Now that sounds crazy, I know. And when I first learned this, I thought, well, that's just a trick. That's just a mathematical convenience. You know, like when you use imaginary numbers. You don't think there's really an imaginary number of apples. But here's the thing. It's not just a convenience. Because if you don't do it this way, if you don't treat the positron as an electron going backwards in time, you get the wrong answer. You can't calculate anything. You can't predict what's going to happen in the experiments. And the experiments are very precise, very accurate, and they match what we calculate. So there's something going on here that's very strange. Let me try to explain what I mean. You see, when particles interact, when an electron does something, emits light, absorbs light, bumps into things, we have these little pictures, these diagrams. And in these diagrams, time goes up, let's say, and space goes sideways, and you draw the electron as a line going forward in time. And if it emits a photon, a little particle of light, you draw a wiggly line coming off, and the electron keeps going. Now, what happens when you have a positron? Well, you draw it as an electron, but the arrow points backwards. It's going down in time instead of up. And here's where it gets really interesting. You see, when an electron and positron meet, they annihilate, right? They disappear, and you get light, you get photons. But look at the diagram. What does it look like? It looks like an electron coming along forward in time, and then it emits some light and turns around and starts going backwards. And when it's going backwards, we call it a positron. It's the same particle, just going the other direction in time. Like if you saw a movie of a ball rolling, and then you reverse the film. It's still the same ball, just going the other way. And this isn't philosophy. This isn't me speculating. This is how you actually get the numbers to come out right. I mean, we've tested this stuff to incredible precision. The predictions match experiments to like 11 decimal places, which is, you know, if I told you I could predict how far it is from New York to Los Angeles, and I got it right to within the width of a human hair, that's the kind of accuracy we're talking about. And the way we get that accuracy is by treating positrons as electrons going backwards in time. Now, you might say, well, okay, fine, but that's just math. It doesn't mean anything really happens backwards in time. And that's a hard question, you see, because in physics, we don't really know what's really happening. We know what we can calculate, and we know what we can measure, and they match. And the calculation requires this picture. So in what sense is it not real? I don't know how to answer that. I mean, if a thing works, if it predicts correctly, if every experiment we do comes out the way the theory says, then what more do you want? The universe doesn't owe us an explanation that makes us feel comfortable. You know, the universe does what it does, and we're trying to figure out rules that match what it does. And the rule that matches is that antiparticles go backwards in time. Now let me tell you something else that's kind of wild. You see, when I said the positron is an electron going backwards in time, I wasn't just talking about positrons. Every particle has an antiparticle, and every antiparticle in the mathematics is the particle going backwards in time. Antiquarks are quarks going backwards. Antiprotons are protons going backwards. Antineutrinos are neutrinos going backwards. The whole concept of antimatter is secretly a statement about time. And this is something that took a while to understand, you know. When antimatter was first discovered, people thought, well, it's just opposite charge, that's all it is. Just a mirror image kind of thing. But when you really dig into the theory, when you really look at how to calculate things, you find that the time direction is the key. And here's something that I think is beautiful. You can imagine a single electron, just one electron, and it's bouncing back and forth in time. So it goes forward for a while, and then something happens and it turns around and goes backward. And then it turns around again and goes forward. And every time it's going backward, we see it as a positron. And every time it's going forward, we see it as an electron. So what looks like many particles, electrons and positrons flying around, could actually be one particle, one single particle, zigzagging through time like a thread going back and forth through a piece of cloth. Now, I'm not saying that's definitely what's happening. I'm saying that's a way to think about it that gives you the right answers. And in physics, that's what we've got. We've got ways of thinking that give right answers, and we're not sure which way of thinking is the real one. Maybe none of them are real in the way we want. Maybe reality doesn't have a picture that fits in our heads. You see, our brains evolved to understand things at our size, at our speed. Things like rocks and trees and lions chasing us. We didn't evolve to understand what happens at tiny, tiny scales, where things are so different, so marvelously different, that none of our ordinary intuitions work. So when I tell you a positron is an electron going backwards in time, and you say, but that doesn't make sense. Well, yeah, it doesn't make sense the way ordinary things make sense. But the question isn't whether it makes sense to your intuition. The question is whether it makes correct predictions. And it does. It really does. Now, here's another thing that's interesting. You might wonder, well, if things can go backwards in time, why don't we see that? Why doesn't my coffee cup suddenly unbreak? Why doesn't heat flow from cold to hot? Well, that's a different question. That's about entropy and statistics and large numbers of particles, and it's complicated. But at the level of individual particles, at the fundamental level, the laws of physics don't care which direction time goes. If you took a movie of two particles bouncing off each other and you ran the movie backwards, it would look perfectly fine. It would obey all the same laws. There's nothing in the fundamental equations that says time has to go one direction. And that's strange, right? We experience time as going one way. We remember the past. We don't remember the future. Eggs break. They don't unbreak. But at the particle level, there's no such preference. The equations work the same, forwards and backwards. And when we describe antiparticles as particles going backwards, we're kind of using that symmetry. We're saying, look, the equations don't care about time direction. So we can draw our diagrams with arrows going either way, and it works. And this brings up something that I think people don't appreciate enough about physics. We don't really understand time. I mean, we can measure it, we can calculate with it, we can predict things. But what time actually is, why it seems to flow, why we experience it the way we do, that's still mysterious. You know, people think physics has all the answers, but we don't.
But we don't. We have some very good tools for calculating. But the deep questions are still open.
And this business with antiparticles going backwards in time, it's a hint, it's a clue that maybe our ordinary idea of time as this thing that flows from past to future, maybe that's not fundamental. Maybe at the deepest level, time is something different than we thought. And I find that exciting, not frustrating, because it means there's more to learn, there's more to figure out. The universe hasn't given up all its secrets, and that's what makes it fun. You see, if we knew everything, if there were no mysteries left, what would be the point? The fun is in figuring things out. The fun is in taking something that seems impossible, like particles going backwards in time, and realizing, wait, that actually makes the calculations work. That's not crazy. That's physics. Now let me show you how this actually works in practice. You see, when physicists calculate things, we draw these little pictures, these diagrams. And they're very simple, just lines and wiggly lines, but they represent something real. They represent what can happen when particles interact. So let's say you have an electron, and it's just sitting there minding its own business, and a photon comes along, a particle of light, and hits it. What happens? Well, the electron absorbs the photon and moves off in a different direction. That's one thing that can happen, and we draw it as two lines coming together. The straight line is the electron, the wiggly line is the photon, and then one line going out, the electron moving away. Simple, right? But here's where it gets interesting. There are other things that can happen, things that seem impossible, but you have to include them to get the right answer. For instance, the electron could emit a photon before it absorbs the incoming one. How can that be? How can it emit something before it receives the energy to emit it? Well, in quantum mechanics, there's this uncertainty, and for very short times, things can happen that seem to violate energy conservation. You borrow energy from the universe for a tiny moment, and then you give it back. And these things, these virtual processes, they affect the final answer, and if you don't include them, you get the wrong prediction. So you have to draw all these diagrams, all the possible ways something could happen, and add them all up. And one of those possibilities, one of those diagrams, involves a positron being created and then disappearing. And in the diagram, that positron is an electron, line going backwards in time. So even in a simple process like light hitting an electron, you have to consider these time-reversed particles, these antiparticles, appearing briefly and vanishing. And when you add up all the contributions from all the diagrams, you get a number. And that number matches experiment to extraordinary precision. And you might say, well, that's just a trick. That's just mathematics. But I don't think so. I think the mathematics is telling us something about how nature works. The math says, consider all possibilities, including particles going backwards in time. And nature says, yes, that's right. That's how I work.
You know, there's something I want to be honest about, because I think it's important we don't fully understand this stuff.
I mean, we can calculate, we can predict, we can do experiments, and everything matches beautifully. But if you ask me, what does it mean that a positron is an electron going backwards in time? I have to say, I don't really know, and I don't think anyone really. There's a difference between being able to calculate something and being able to understand it in some deep sense. You see, we have these mathematical tools, and they work incredibly well. But the pictures in our heads, the way we try to visualize what's happening, that's always a little bit off, because the reality at this level is not like anything we experience in daily life. It's not like balls bouncing. It's not like waves in water. It's something else, something that only the mathematics captures properly. And when we say things like particles go backwards in time, we're using words that come from our ordinary experience. We're trying to squeeze this strange quantum reality into language that was invented for talking about tables and chairs, and it doesn't quite fit. So I want you to hold these ideas loosely, you know. Don't think you've understood it completely. If you think you've understood quantum mechanics completely, you probably haven't, because it's genuinely strange. It's not strange because we haven't figured it out yet. It's strange because nature at small scales is fundamentally different from nature at large scales. The rules change, the behavior changes, and our intuitions, which evolved for the large-scale world, they just don't apply. And that's okay. That's not a failure. That's just how it is. And the wonderful thing is, we can still make predictions. We can still do physics. We can still figure things out, even if we can't picture it in our heads the way we picture ordinary things.
Let me tell you why I think this matters beyond just physics. You see, this whole story about antiparticles and time reversal, it teaches us something about how science works. We didn't start with this idea. Nobody woke up one morning and said, hey, I bet positrons or electrons going backwards in time. That would be crazy. The idea came from the math. People were trying to calculate things, and they kept getting infinities, nonsense answers that didn't make sense. And they tried different approaches, different tricks. And eventually, someone figured out that if you draw the diagrams a certain way, if you treat the antiparticles as time-reversed particles, the infinities go away, and you get sensible answers. And at first, people thought, well, that's just a mathematical trick. But then the predictions started matching experiments really, really well. And now we use this all the time. It's the standard way of doing calculations in particle physics. And the lesson is that sometimes the math knows something we don't. Sometimes you follow the math, even when it seems strange, and you end up somewhere true, somewhere real. And that requires a certain humility. You have to be willing to say, okay,
My intuition says this is nonsense, but the math says it works, and the experiments say it works. So maybe my intuition is wrong. Maybe I need to update how I think about things. And that's hard for people, you know. We like our intuitions. We trust them. But nature doesn't care about our intuitions. Nature does what it does. And our job is to figure out the rules, not to insist that the rules make sense to us. They have to make sense internally. They have to be consistent. They have to predict experiments correctly. But they don't have to feel comfortable. And this business with time going backwards, it definitely doesn't feel comfortable, but it works.
So where does this leave us? Well, we have this theory, this quantum electrodynamics, and it says that antiparticles are particles moving backwards in time. And it's the most accurate theory we've ever had. The predictions match experiments to more decimal places than any other theory in history. And at the heart of it is this strange idea that time, at the fundamental level, isn't what we thought. It's not this river flowing one direction. It's something more flexible, something that particles can move through either way. And I think that's beautiful. I really do. Because it shows us that the universe is deeper than we imagined. It's stranger and more wonderful than our everyday experience suggests. You know, we walk around and we see trees and cars and people, and everything seems solid and sensible, and time flows from past to future, and that's that. But underneath all of that, at the level of atoms and electrons and photons, there's this other world, this quantum world, where the rules are completely different, where things can go backwards in time, where particles can be in many places at once, where the very act of looking at something changes what it does. And somehow, out of all that strangeness, out of all that quantum weirdness, the ordinary world emerges. The solid, sensible world we live in comes from this bizarre underlying reality. And that's the deepest mystery of all. How does the ordinary come from the extraordinary? How does classical physics emerge from quantum physics? How does the arrow of time emerge from laws that don't care about time direction? These are open questions still, and that's what makes physics exciting. There's still so much to figure out. So if you take one thing from this, take this. Particles going backwards in time is not science fiction. It's real physics. It's how we calculate things, and it works better than anything else we've ever found. And if that seems strange, good, it should, because nature is strange. And the more we learn, the stranger it gets. And I wouldn't have it any other way.
Let me tell you a little bit about how this whole thing came about, because it didn't just appear out of nowhere, you see.
Back in the late 1940s, physicists had a problem, a big problem. They were trying to calculate simple things like how an electron interacts with light, and they kept getting infinity as the answer, which is nonsense, right? If you calculate something and you get infinity, that means something's wrong with your calculation. And people were stuck. They knew the basic ideas were right. Quantum mechanics worked, electromagnetism worked, but when you put them together, something went haywire. And different people tried different things, and eventually there was this breakthrough, this way of organizing the calculations, using these little pictures, these diagrams. And the key insight was that you had to include everything, every possible way something could happen, even the weird ones, even the ones where particles pop into existence for a tiny moment and then disappear, even the ones where an electron emits a photon and then reabsorbs it before anything can detect it. And when you include all of that, when you add up all the possibilities in the right way, the infinities cancel out, and you get a finite answer, a sensible answer, and that answer matches experiments. Now, the thing about these diagrams is they forced you to think about antiparticles in a new way. You couldn't just ignore them. They were part of the calculation. They had to be there. And the most natural way to include them, the way that made the math simplest and most elegant, was to draw them as particles going backwards in time. And at first people thought, well, that's just a bookkeeping trick. That's just a way to keep track of things. But the more they worked with it, the more it seemed like maybe it was something deeper. Maybe the math was telling us something true about nature. And you know, that's often how it works in physics. You start with a trick, a shortcut, a way to make calculations easier. And then you realize, wait, this isn't just convenient. This is real.
Now here's something that puzzles everybody. If antiparticles are just particles going backwards in time, and if the fundamental laws don't care about which direction time goes, then why is there any matter at all? You see, in the Big Bang, in the beginning of the universe, there should have been equal amounts of matter and antimatter, particles and antiparticles created in pairs. And then what? They should have all annihilated each other.
Every electron should have found a positron. Every quark should have found an antiquark. Boom! Flash of light, and nothing left. Just radiation. No atoms, no stars, no planets, no people. But that's not what happened. Obviously, we're here. The universe is full of matter, and almost no antimatter. So something happened. Something made a tiny imbalance. A little bit more matter than antimatter. Maybe 1 part in a billion. And that tiny excess, that little leftover, that's everything we see. That's all the galaxies, all the stars, all of us. And we don't fully understand why that imbalance exists. You see, the laws of physics as we understand them are almost perfectly symmetric between matter and antimatter. Almost, but not quite. There's a tiny, tiny difference, and that tiny difference might be why we exist. And this connects to the time reversal thing, because if antiparticles are particles going backwards in time, then the asymmetry between matter and antimatter is connected to an asymmetry in time. And that's deep. That's really deep. Because we experience time as having a direction. The past is different from the future. And maybe that's connected to why there's more matter than antimatter. Maybe it's all related, and we're still figuring it out.
There's one more thing I want to tell you about, and it's called CPT symmetry. And don't worry about the letters, just listen to the idea. You see, physicists have found that if you do 3 things at once, if you swap particles for antiparticles, that's C, and you flip space like looking in a mirror, that's P, and you reverse time, that's T, if you do all 3 of these things together, the laws of physics stay exactly the same. Now that's remarkable. Think about what it means. It means that an antiparticle going backwards in time in a mirror world would behave exactly like a regular particle going forwards in time in our world. They're equivalent. They're the same thing in some deep sense. And this symmetry, this CPT symmetry, as far as we know, it's exact. It's never been violated. Every experiment we've done confirms it. And it tells us that time reversal is built into the fabric of physics. It's not an accident. It's not a trick. It's fundamental. And you might wonder, why? Why would the universe be set up this way? Why would swapping particles for antiparticles and reversing time and flipping space leave everything unchanged? And the honest answer is, we don't know. It seems to be a deep property of nature, maybe the deepest, and we're still trying to understand what it means. You know, physics is like that. We discover these patterns, these symmetries, and they work beautifully. But the question of why they're there, that's often still open. And I think that's wonderful, because it means there's more to discover. There's more to figure out. The universe hasn't finished surprising us.